Okay, here's our review for our first Gemara test of the year. Should have been the second, but it's the first. We're going to start with Unit 4, the last unit that we had done in Masechet Brachot. This unit can be found on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Bet in Masechet Brachot, which again we're learning the second parak, otherwise known as Hayakore, because that's just the first few words of the parak. So what we'll do here is we're basically going to read through the Gemara. I'll read halacha by halacha. Again, this unit that we did is really just a culmination of a few halachot. I'll read one halacha at a time and translate it. We'll pause, we'll give a little explanations, then we'll move on. Tanu Rabbanan, our rabbis taught. Again, whenever you see Tanu Rabbanan, it means a new conversation. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Okay, that is a quote from a pasuk, obviously a quote from Kriyat Shema as well. So that pasuk itself, we'll put in quotations there. Okay, that pasuk of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, ad kan, through there, tzrichat kavanah halev, requires kavanah in your heart. Divrei Rav Meir, those are the words of Rabbi Meir. Amar Rava says halacha k'Ravi Meir. The halacha is in accordance to Rabbi Meir that only the pasuk of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad requires kavanah, that you know what the words mean while you're paying attention to what the words mean. You're thinking about what the words mean while you are saying them. So that is I guess we'll just draw a line instead. That is the first halacha in our Gemara. Again, Tan Rabbanan, rabbis taught, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that pasuk, ad kan tzrichat kavanah halev, that part up through there requires kavanah in your heart. Divrei Meir, those are the words of Rabbi Meir. Amar Rava said halacha k'Rav Meir, the halacha follows Rabbi Meir. Then we go on to the next halacha, Tanya. It says in a Braita, Sumchus Omer. Sumchus says the following. Here's just the name of a Tana. Kol ha'ma'arich be'echad. Anybody who extends the word echad in Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, ma'arichin lo yamav ushnotav. We extend his days and years. From here, he'll have a longer life. Some people say a more fulfilling life. That is his halacha. Now we have some additions to that. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Rav Acha bar Yaakov said, Uvedalit, that as long as the letter you're extending is the dalit. That's what the dalit. You're supposed to extend the dalit of the last letter in the word echad. Amar Rav Ashi adds again, Ubelvad, as long as shelo yachtof b'chet. You don't cut off the chet. Instead of saying cha, you could say ch, and that's what you're not supposed to do. That is the next halacha. Okay, so we'll just draw another line there. That's our next set of halachot, I guess you could say. Our next group of laws. 1 second, sorry about that. Let's do that again so it's not. Okay, not good enough. Okay, so we'll read it one more time. Tanya, it says in a Braita, Sumchus Omer, Sumchus says, Kol ha'ma'arich be'echad, anyone who extends the word echad, ma'arichin lo yamavu shnotav, his days and years are lengthened for him. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Rav Acha bar Yaakov says, Uvedalit, as long as you're extending the dalit, that's what you're supposed to extend. Amar Rav Ashi said, Uvevav shelo yachtof b'chet, as long as you don't cut off the chet, you say echad and not echd. You don't cut off that chet. Finally, the last halacha, Rav Yirmiyah Yativ, he was sitting, Kamed Rav Chia bar Abba. Rav Yirmiyah was sitting before Rav Chia bar Abba, they were learning. Chazia, Rav Yirmiyah saw, Dahava Ma'arich Tuva, that Rav Chia bar Abba was extending, extending the dalit, Tuva, excessively, too much. Amar Le, Rav Yirmiyah said to him, Kivan da'amlichte lamal lamata. Once you've made God king above and below, ula arba ruchot hashemaim, in the four directions of the heavens. After you've done that, furthermore, lo tzrichat, no more is needed. He was telling him that just have right. Here's where we learn the purpose of extending the dalid, giving you time to think about God being king everywhere. So again, Rav Yirmiyah Yativ Kamed Rav Chia bar Abba. Rav Yirmiyah was sitting before Rav Chia bar Abba. Rav Yirmiyah saw the Hava Ma'arich Tuva, that Rav Chia bar Abba, Hava was Ma'arich, extending Tuva, excessively, extending the dalid, right? Amar Le said to him, Kivan dim lichte lamal lamata, once you have made God king, lamal lamata, above and below, arba ruchot hashemaim, the four directions of the world, furthermore, lo tzrichat, is not needed. We saw a few Rashis also that helped us explain a little bit. Rashi uvedalit and Rashi uvalad shaliach tov b'chet, explaining why the dalit or what about the dalit and what's wrong with cutting off the chet. The Rashi about uvedalit says uvedalit uvalo b'chet. You don't extend the chet. Don't say echad. The kol kama del amar ach. If you said ach below dalit without the dalit yet, lo mishtamid. It doesn't mean anything. Uma beta baharata. What's the point in extending it? The point we see from Rashi that you're supposed to extend the word echad, the entire word. So if you had not gotten to the dalit yet, so therefore you have not said the entire word. Therefore you're not extending the word echad. You might be extending the dalit. The chet. You might be extending something, but you're supposed to extend the dalit because you want to make sure that you have the complete word echad. In addition to that Rashi, we saw a comment from Tosfot. Tosfot you could see again, obviously over here on the top of your Gimel Bet. As we discussed, Tosfot is always on the outside of the page, and Tosfot usually does is it's Baalei Tosfot. There are many different people that wrote Tosfots, and Tosfot will very often either solve problems with our Gemara or compare one Gemara to the next. So if we look at our Tosfot, we'll see the short one. Amar Rava halacha k'Rabbi Meir. So the Gemara Tosfot here is discussing the fact that Rava says we follow the opinion of Rabbi Meir that you only need kavanah for the first pasuk. V'hachi hilchata. Tosfot says this is the halacha. We follow this halacha. Bottom line, nowadays we follow the halacha of Rava. Of Rabbi Meir, according to Rava, that you only have to have kavanah for the meaning of the words to the first pasuk of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Why? The Kaimalan Kara, we follow Rava Dehu Batra. He's later on. He's later on than who? Rava here is later on than Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was the one who said we follow Rabbi Akiva, that we have to have kavanah for the entire paragraph. Rava, who came much later on, said no, we follow Rabbi Meir, and we follow Rabbi Meir, and we follow Rava, because he's Batra, who Batra, comes from a later generation. And we discussed the idea that when it comes to right and wrong, when we're deciding right and wrong in the Gemara, we usually go by, when we're deciding which opinion is correct, we go by the earlier generations. When it comes to deciding, when we have two opinions that are equal of value in terms of, and we're trying to decide which one do we follow in terms of our practice, so then we always go by the later generation, the rabbis of the later generations, either because they have all the wisdom, combined wisdom of the previous generations, and also because they know the people that they're deciding halacha for, they know the people of their generation with the society, with the culture, and their values, and the halacha has to be decided based on the generation. Okay, we're now going to do a quick review of Unit 5. Unit 5 was our first Gemara related to Hanukkah, the one about Mahadran and Mahadran, the different ways of fulfilling the mitzvah of lighting Hanukkah candles. Again, you can see it's somewhere in the middle of Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Bet, and we notice that it's in Masechet Shabbat. There's no separate Masechet discussing Hanukkah candles. Hanukkah candles actually does come up in the discussion. The reason why Hanukkah candles it comes up in discussion about Shabbat candles. That's why it's in Masechet Shabbat. So here's our Gemara. The Gemara starts off with two halachot that everyone agrees to. Tana Rabbanan, rabbis taught, and again, Tana Rabbanan is always a new discussion. Mitzvah Ner Chanukah, the mitzvah of Chanukah is, mitzvah of Chanukah is Ner Ishu Beito. It's a candle for a man in his household, just one candle each night. So on the fifth night, you just light one candle. That's the basic mitzvah of Chanukah. Mahadrin, what's the nicer way to do the mitzvah? Ner lekol echad ve'echad. One candle for each person in your household. So if you have 8 people in your family, so on the third night, you're going to light 8 candles if you wanted to do Mahadrin. This is what everybody agrees to. Again, Tana Rabbanan, rabbis taught mitzvah of Chanukah. The basic mitzvah of Chanukah is Ner Ishu Beito, one candle for a man and his family. Mahadrin, you want to do it nicer. Ner lekol echad ve'echad. One candle for each man. Then we continue with a situation which has a machloket. Mahadrin min mahadrin. What if you wanted to do nicer than the nicer way of doing it? I mean, the nicest possible way of fulfilling the mitzvah. Then what should you do? So we have two opinions. Beit Shammai Omrim. Beit Shammai say, Yom Rishon Madlik Shmona. You light 8 on the first day. Mikan ve'elech. From then and on, pochet b'holech. You pochet, take away b'holech as you go. That's the opinion of Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel say, no, if you want to do Mahadrin min Mahadrin, the best way of lighting, so what do? Yom Rishon Madlik Achat. On the first day you light 1. Mikan ve'elech. From then on, Mosifa Holech. You add as you go. That is the opinion of Beit Hillel. We'll do that one more time. We'll read it from the top. Just going to get rid of these, get rid of the circles over there so it's easier to follow. Okay, here we go. Tan Rabbanan, rabbis taught mitzvah ner Chanukah. The basic mitzvah of Chanukah is ner ishu beito, a candle for a person, one candle for a man and his household. Mahadrin, the nicer way to do it is ner lekol echad ve'echad, one candle for each person in the family. Mahadrin, mina mahadrin, to do it nicer, even more than the nicest way possible. Beit Shammai Amrim, Beit Shammai say Yom Rishon Malik Shmon, on the first day you light 8. Mikan ve'elech, from then on pochet b'holech, you take away as you go. Beit Hillel say Yom Rishon Madlik Achad. The first day you light 1. Mikan ve'elech, from then on Mosif Holech, you add. So again, Beit Shammai says 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Beit Hillel says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and in terms of interpreting this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, what this means exactly, we saw two opinions. The first opinion was the opinion of Tosfot, which as you can see is in the middle of the daf there. And let's zoom in a little bit, so let's read it quickly. Mahadrin, mina mahadrin. So near it appears to Rabbi Yitzchak, who's one of the Balei Tosfot. The Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, lo kaimi. They're not discussing Ella. They're only discussing lo kaimi Ella. They're only discussing ner ishu beito. When they say 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that's discussing the basic mitzvah of one candle for a man and his family. Meaning the basic mitzvah is 1. If you want to do mahadrin, you'll light for each member of your family. And if you want to do the best way, you just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, or 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You don't multiply it by the number of people that are in the family. It's just aner ishu beito. It's going on one candle for a man in his household. So you start with 1 and you go to 8, or you start with 8 and then you go down to 1. Then what's the reason that you do this? He says, Shekain yesh yoter hidur. It's even nicer. Why? It becomes obvious. When you either add as you go according to Beit Hillel, or machaser, you take away as you go according to Beit Shammai. It's more obvious that if you just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you don't do based on the number of people in the family also, so on the 7th night you would have just 7 or just 2 according to Beit Shammai. So then it's more obvious that it's keneged yam ha'nechnasim o yotzim, that it's based on the number of days that come or go. Avalam osa ner lekol echad, but if you do a candle for each person and then go 1 to 8 or 8 to 1, afilu yosef mikan ve'elech lek, even if you add from then and on, lekeker, it's not obvious. She is beru that people walking by will think ken yesh b'nei adam bayit. That time people are in the house, right? So if you see 16 candles, if on the on the 4th night, you're not going to know that whether it's the 4th night and there are 4 people in the house, or it's because there are 16 people in the family. So Tosfot said that's why on the 4th night you should just light 4. That way, in some way, it's obvious what night it is. People know that it's the 4th night. They see 4 candles. Oh, beautiful. They're fulfilling the mitzvah in the most beautiful way. They're lighting 4 candles for the 4th night. But if they walk by on the 4th night and they see 16, so they have no way of knowing if it's 4 people in the family on the 4th night and you're doing it the best way, or there's 16 people in the family lighting 1 for each person. So that's the reason for that basically that Tosfot says that when Beit Hillel says 1 to 8 and Beit Shammai says 8 to 1, it's not multiplying it by the number of people in the house. However, we then saw the opinion of Rambam in the Mishnah Torah. Again, the Mishnah Torah, remember we discussed the idea of Mishnah Torah, it's the bottom line. Rambam went through the Gemara and said, you want to know what you're supposed to do? Look in the Mishnah Torah. I wrote it all down. If you forget the back and forth, the conversation, here's what you're supposed to do. So what does he say? How many candles do you light? So as Rambam says, that you actually multiply by the number of people in the house. One who wants to do nicer than this and do it the best way will light a candle for each person on the first night, and will add a candle each night for each person in the house. That's why I said, how does it work? If there are 10 in your family, you light 10 candles on the first night, 20 on the second night, 30 on the third, until you have 80 on the last night. According to Rambam, you multiply Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel when they say 8 to 1 or 1 to 8, the mitzvah the nicest way, that's multiplied by the number of people in the family. Rambam seems to be not concerned about the fact that people are not really going to know what night it is, because if they know, or they're not going to know whether you're lighting based on what night it is, or whether it's because that there are that many people in the family. It's just Rambam with that. So what do we do in terms of halacha? So we look in the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch starts, how many candles should one light? One on the first night you light 1, and then you add 1 each night until by the 8th night there should be 8. That's the opinion of Tosfot. Even if there are a lot of people in the household, don't light anymore. So his opinion is that the nicest way to fulfill the mitzvah is to do 1 to 8, 8 to 1, not multiply by the number of people in the house. The Ramah here, who generally represents the Ashkenaz custom, right? It's the notes of the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserlis, commenting on the Shulchan Aruch. Some say that each person should light, like the Rambam, which is the most popular custom, right? But we know there's a problem with that, because if you're lighting for each person multiplied by the number, whatever night it is, it's hard to tell what's going on. He says that's why, but you should be careful that each person should put their candles in a designated place so that it's obvious how many candles each person is lighting. That's why we said, according to the Ramah, it's a compromise opinion. He says, yes, follow the opinion of Rambam to multiply it by the number of people in the house. But in order to solve Tosfot's problem, to not have to deal with Tosfot's problem, that we're not going to be able to tell, what night it is, have everyone light their own menorah, so that way when people see, let's say it's the fourth night and there are 4 people in your house, they see 16 candles. So if they see just 16 candles all together, they're not going to know, well, are there 16 people in your house, and is it the 4th night? Is that why you're lighting because it's the 4th night, or is it, or whatever, you're not lighting based on the night, or is it because there are 4 people in the house and you're multiplying it by 4? If they see 4 separate Chanukiyot, 4 separate menorah with 4 candles, they'll know that everyone in the house is lighting, and each person is lighting because it's the 4th night. That's the way to do it, says the Ramah, which is our practice now. Okay, now we get on to Unit 6, which was the unit that discussed the time of candles. Again, in the middle of Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. It actually comes right before Unit 5. Unit 5 just happened to have been the unit that we did first. Okay, here we go. It's on line 12. So remember, we started off, we're discussing the opinion of Rav. The Rav Kasava, Rav holds Kavta Ein Zakukla, that if your candles are extinguished, Ein Zakukla, you are not Zakukla responsible for them. Once they go out, you're fine. That's the opinion of Rav. As long as you lit your candles properly, if they go out, you have no reason to relight them. You're not obligated. The Gemara says, "V'kavta ein zakukla." Is that true? That if they extinguish, you don't have to light it? For Aminu, but the following statement is a contradiction to that. What does the statement say? The mitzvah of Chanukah candles is mishatishcha chama from sunset until sheticha regal min hashuk, until people leave the marketplace, till the marketplace empties. So that statement that there's a time period for lighting implies that it should stay lit that entire time. That contradicts Rav's statement, who holds that you don't have to relight it. The kavta ein zakukla, and if it goes out, you don't have to relight it. Is that true? For Aminu, but the following contradicts that. The statement says the mitzvah Chanukah candles is mishatishcha chama sheticha regal min hashuk. And the Gemara says, my love, does this not mean the ikavta that it goes out during this time, hadr madgla, you have to light it again? I mean, practically, it has to stay lit that whole time. That's what that time period means. So Rav seems to be wrong. So Gemara says, no, that's not the interpretation. What's the interpretation of the statement? The ilo adlik madlik. No, it's if you did not yet light, then madlik, then you have to light during this time. Meaning, this time period from sunset until the marketplace empties it doesn't have to stay lit that whole time. And if it goes out, you quickly relight it so it stays lit that whole time. Rather, if you have not lit yet, that's when you light. That's the time period that you're supposed to light. You have to light at some point during that time, but not that it has to stay lit that whole time. V'inami, or alternatively, and what's another way of interpreting this statement? L'shiura, it's telling us how much oil you have to put in, or how long the candles have to burn. The candles have to burn from the amount of time from sunset until the marketplace empties. Let's say that's a half an hour. So it's telling us that no matter when you light Chanukah candles, you're supposed to put in enough oil that it burns a half an hour. But not that if it goes out, you have to relight it. As long as if you put in enough oil for half an hour, and then it goes out after 5 minutes, you don't have to relight it again, as long as in the first place you put enough oil in. So again, just to recap this Gemara starts off by thinking that this statement, that the mitzvah Chanukah candles has a time period, as contradicting Rav, who says that that it doesn't have to relight. You don't have to relight it if it goes out. The time period tells us have to stay lit that whole time. And the Gemara says no. Rather, that statement can mean one of two things. It either means you have to light at some point during that time, but not it has to stay lit, or it's telling us how much oil you need. Let's read it one more time. The kavta ein zakukla, is it true? And if it goes out, you're not responsible to it, Raminu, but the following contradicts that. The statement says the mitzvah of Chanukah candles it's from sunset ad sheticha regal min hashuk, until the marketplace empties. My love, does this not mean the ikavta that if it goes out during that time, hadr madlei, you have to light it again against Rav? The Gemara says no, that's not the interpretation. Rather, what's the interpretation? To ilo adlik, if you have not yet lit madlik, you can light during that time. Inami, or alternatively shira, it's just telling us how much oil to put in. So what do we do nowadays practically? So we definitely follow the opinion of Rav that if it goes out, you don't have to light again. And therefore we interpret this statement telling us what the mitzvah is, that either you have to light at any point during that time or the amount of oil. Do we follow one opinion, both? So if you look at the Rambam says you should light Chanukah candles before sunset, rather at sunset. So you're lighting at sunset. So we're following definitely the first opinion, the first reinterpretation of that statement, that's telling you that's when you're supposed to light. And then he says, how long is that? About half an hour or more after sunset. And then he says, if this time passed, you cannot light. You also must put enough oil in it so that it could last until the marketplace empties. So you have to do both. Okay, you light during that time, right? And you also have to put enough oil so that it lasts that entire time. But if it goes out, what are you supposed to do? That's not your responsibility. Now we look at Tosfot. There's a Tosfot down here. D'ilo adlik madlik. Tosfot here says, starts off by seeming to follow the opinion of the Rambam, that we try to do both, right? That there's two that the best thing to do is to light it, after sunset, because that's the time period you're supposed to light, and put enough oil in. So he says, Omar Hari Porat. Porat says that we should be careful to light at night right away. Why? So that it doesn't get too late. Because again, we're following the opinion that when it says Ad Shtecha Regel from Mishatishcha, that it's from sunset. There's a time period from sunset until the marketplace empties. You have to light during that time. If you missed it, you missed it. So he says light right away. But if you do delay past the right time and you miss the time to light, you should still light out of doubt, because there is another interpretation. Meaning there is an interpretation that it doesn't matter when you light your candles, as long as you have that amount of oil that would last a half an hour, no matter whenever you lit it. So according to that opinion, there is no time period really. So according to interpretation number one, there's a specific time period. So he says you should light right away, so make sure you get it in during that time period. But since there's another explanation of the Gemara, another interpretation of that statement, which says it's just the amount, and you can light at any time, so still if you miss that first perfect time, that according to all opinions, right, you'd be following it if you lit during that time, so you should still light later as long as you put in the right amount. And then that's the Porat's opinion. He says now, but look what Ri says. Ri, who's not Porat, someone else, Rabbeinu Yitzchak's opinion, is that nowadays we don't have to worry about the time at all, because we're only lighting for those in our house. Since we're only lighting for the people in our house, we're not lighting specifically for those in public, because again, the mitzvah changed once the Jewish people became persecuted and we were not allowed to light candles outdoors. So we started lighting indoors, and the mitzvah actually changed. People were just really lighting for the people in their house. Since we're not worried about the people outdoors, we don't care about the time period of the marketplace empties or any of that stuff, because that would only make sense if you're lighting for the people outside, because we want to make sure we light by the time the marketplace empties, so that people on the way home will see your candles. But now, since we don't really worry about people outside seeing our candles, you can light at any point during the night. Again, two opinions in Toso. Porat saying that you have to light right away at night. Ri saying no, things have changed, and therefore you could just light in your house, and you can light at any time, so you're not worried about people walking home seeing it. You're only lighting for the people in your house. Again, if you go through, I'm about to post this video on Haiku. You can watch this video on Haiku again. If you can watch this video on Haiku again, you just watch this video. You can watch it again if you want. And also, if you want to go over the packets are posted on Haiku again that have all the answers in them. So between watching this video, reviewing it, getting the translation down, read through. If I were you, I'd also read through the translation chart, which is available there on Haiku under tests. And good luck studying.